tariffs. Again, a great story in the Wall Street Journal today. If you haven't read it, it explains something that's kind of been out there, but they do a nice job of codifying it. There's sort of three buckets of tariff purposes, and some tariffs can have multi-purposes. There's tariffs to leverage non-tariff issues, like saying control fentanyl, control the border. There are tariffs that are reciprocal, that are meant to respond to both formal and informal trade barriers. The United States has long believed that Europe, Asia, Latin America, pretty much every other country has these non-tariff barriers that create an unlevel playing field. And so the president is looking at some tariffs, he says, to do that. And then there's the third category, which is a very controversial one, not that the other two aren't, which is tariffs to raise money. The notion that tariffs will bring in revenue that will allow taxes to be reduced and the deficit to be reduced. There's a lot of skepticism on that point, not just amongst liberal economists and liberal New York Times writers, but even some Republicans in Congress think that that thing is not serious. So, as I said, Sean, the president said he's going to do these aluminum and steel tariffs today, and tariffs for the whole world later in the week. Is this happening or not?
I think so. The one issue, there's two issues that I think, if you go back and look at Donald Trump going back into the 80s, that he's consistent on. It's immigration and tariff or market access, tariffs being the tool to get you primarily that. So when he says tariffs on steel and aluminum and Europe's next, I don't think there's any question. Now, how it manifests itself, I can't tell you the exact day or hour, but there's no question it's going to happen on both fronts.
Dan?
I mean, I won't dare try to predict if it will or will not happen and for how long, because they're tossing these out all the time. I mean, I think the challenge, Mark, even with what you just listed, is how many times can you go to the well on this? I mean, it's okay. We want it for non-economic purposes like fentanyl and the border crisis. We want it for bread and butter of like actual economic and market access. Then we want it because we want to raise revenue. He said in the Fox interview, oh, I'm going to come back and see if Mexico and Canada have done enough, but he won't really define it. At some point, the kind of constant churn, the constant threat, the chaos can become a problem for us in that increasingly CEOs are saying, this is a little chaotic, and it's the one thing that companies want the most is stability. Tell us what the rules are, even if they're bad, and we will make a plan and operate in that system. If you're constantly throwing out uncertainty, which is what he likes to do, it can start to hurt our own economic climate. Consumer confidence dropped here recently. It starts to become a problem.
So there's a couple of things there. Now, remember, part of the reason that you have to say all those different things is, like, for example, in Canada and Mexico's case, we have a trade agreement with them. So you can't openly say we're doing this for, because we want to bring in more money or bring manufacturing home, because the existing trade agreement prohibits that. So they use special emergency powers. If you're a WTO member or part of the reason that they have to go to these various buckets, even though the motive may be true, the same behind each, is they publicly have to say something to justify each one of the different things that they do, right? So if you're a WTO member, if you've got an existing trade agreement, then you have to sort of find a weasel way around the existing agreements to do what you have to do. And that's why for Canada and Mexico in particular, we had to say it was the Emergency Powers Act. But I will tell you, like I said, if there's two issues that there's no question where President Trump's default position is, it's immigration and trade.
But I mean, I think that's the problem, because at some point, and you're starting to see this, countries are like, why should we make agreements with you guys?
But Dan, see, that's where the point is. Ultimately, what Trump wants is all those companies to say it's better to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. and do it here because we know we're not going to get screwed. Trump wants manufacturing and jobs brought back to the U.S. Full stop.
But it's not just manufacturing. I mean, the problem is it impacts so many other companies in so many different ways that it just creates I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So if I'm thinking of doing a big deal or making a big acquisition, I want to know what that, runway looks like, because I'm putting a lot of money on the line. And I just think you're starting to see more and more businesses they're not criticizing Trump because that's not in their interest. No one wants to go out, but they're just saying kind of time out.